Hi everyone, welcome back. Today I'm going to share with you 5 simple and maybe to some of you who are watching kind of funny and weird Dutch habits to help simplify your life. So we Dutchies tend to like things to be very simple and practical and straightforward, and that reflects in the way that we go about certain things. I always love sharing a bit more of my culture with you on the channel, and of course we are by no means perfect over here, but we do like to keep a level head in life and not make things more complicated than they need to be. So let's talk about it. I also want to thank the sponsor for today's video, Wild, and I'm so happy to be working with them again because I'm such a fan of their products. I have used their natural deodorant myself exclusively for a really long time for many different reasons. They are vegan, cruelty-free, zero waste, made with natural ingredients, eco-conscious company, all things that I find very important, but probably most importantly, because they actually work. I apply this once in the morning and I feel fresh and I smell fresh all day, and that is just a really nice feeling. How it works is you get one reusable case that you can keep using over and over, and then you can just click in these bamboo compostable refills. So no plastic, no waste, a really great system. And they have the best smells in the world. I always love their cherry blossom scent myself, and right now I have Arctic Ice Queen, Sugar Plum Fairy, and my favorite, Enchanted Forest, which is a little woody and smells really sophisticated. I have it in my case now. They also just introduced a new star case, really cute, and for every star case purchased, Wild will plant 2 trees on top of their usual tree planting efforts. So I really recommend giving them a try. It's just so nice to have a natural deodorant that doesn't have aluminum, parabens, and sulfates, and it actually works and it applies well and that doesn't irritate my skin. It's just the best in my opinion. And because of Black Friday, they now have a really big discount, 33% off everything. So you can click my link in the description box or scan the QR code right there to check them out. Huge thank you to Wild. And let's begin with the first Dutch habit. Now I'm going to be generalizing here a little bit because of course not all Dutch people are the same way and do things the same way. So this video is based on my own experience being a Dutch person and having lived here all my life. I also did do a little bit of research, but in the end everyone is different. So keep that in mind. Let's start with one that I think many people will find very interesting or perhaps even a little weird, especially in the beginning, and that is something called the sixes culture, or in Dutch, zesjescultuur. Sixes culture means that a student is putting in no more effort than is necessary to get a 6 out of 10 in exams. And Dutch exams are scored on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, and if you get a 6, then generally you will pass. It's even so usually that when you get a 5.5 you pass, because 5.5 rounds up to a 6. So when a student tries to get a 6 out of 10 instead of getting the highest grade possible, that is called sixes culture. Now, not every student participates in sixes culture. I know I personally didn't. When I was in school, I did try to get the highest grade possible, and I usually wasn't really satisfied with anything lower than an 8 out of 10. But speaking honestly, I was part of the maybe 2 or 3 students in my class that were the exception. Most students in my class just tried to get a 6 out of 10, and then if they got a higher grade, so 7, 8, 9, or 10, then that is nice. But it's extra, it's like a bonus. And in most cases, if a child comes home with their report card and all they have is 6s out of 10, then usually the student and their parents will be quite happy about it. And sometimes it even goes further, that when someone gets a higher grade than a 6, then they kind of conclude that they put in too much time and effort studying for that exam because it wasn't necessary and they could have spent that time on other things. So I imagine people from other cultures listening to this who may be really surprised to hear this. From what I know from American culture, for example, it seems to be more focused on performance and meeting your potential and working and studying really hard and like not being satisfied with being average. Now, of course, something to consider here is that getting into higher education from high school works differently here. It is much less dependent on getting high grades and having all the extracurricular activities. Usually with most schools, you can just get in if you have your diploma, and no one is really going to be looking at your grades in most cases. But another thing that I think is important here is that Dutch people, so both the students and their parents and the teachers, like to focus not just on academic performance, but also on the well-being of the student. We don't necessarily want to encourage strong competition between the students, which can lead to stress and burnout. So of course we do value education, but the way we go about it is also something that we tend to consider. So oftentimes there's really not a strong need to push yourself to get the highest grades possible if that detracts from your happiness and your well-being. I personally can see both sides to the Dutch sixes culture thing, but I think what we can take away from this is that sometimes in life our priority doesn't always have to be our output, our status, our performance, but it can also be our happiness and our health and our well-being. I talked about this on the channel before about how I now purposefully try to half-ass certain things in my life, and that is very refreshing to me as someone who usually has quite high standards and high demands and who is used to pushing myself a lot. So with things that I find very important, I still want to give it my absolute all. But with other things, I'm practicing with just being okay and average and having that be enough, just good is good enough. So if you're watching this, and especially if you're maybe someone who has perfectionism tendencies or tends to push yourself a lot, maybe there are some areas in your life that you can identify where you can try out the Dutch sixes mentality for yourself. And I would love to hear about your experiences when it comes to high school and higher education where you're from. Is it very different than how we do things here? I would love to know that. So if you're comfortable, please share that in the comments. Alright, this next one is about birthday culture, and it is the custom here that when it is a Dutch person's birthday, then they will bring the cake. So in many cultures, I think it is customary when it is someone's birthday, then their workplace and their colleagues will arrange for a cake and maybe a present and some kind of get-together to celebrate the person's birthday. But here in the Netherlands, it works a little differently. If it is your birthday, then you are the one who is supposed to bring treats to work to share with everyone. So you are the one who is supposed to be generous and treat people. We say, wie jarig is, trakteert. Same with little kids. When I was in elementary school, if it was my birthday, then I would bring treats to school to share with the other kids and with the teachers. And same with friends and family. If it is your birthday, then you are the one who decides if you want to have a party or not, and throw the party and do the invites and arrange for all the food and pay for everything, etc. And surprise parties where someone arranges a party for someone else, they do happen. Maybe also like for special birthdays, like if someone turns 50, for example, but it's really not so common here. So the first benefit is, again, I think it is more practical and more efficient, because if the birthday person does it, then everyone only has to do it once a year. Whereas if you have to do it for your colleagues, then you have to arrange for a cake and a thing for every time it is someone's birthday at work. And especially if you work in a big team, then that can happen quite often. Whereas if the birthday person treats, then everyone only has to do it once a year. This also means that you get to choose the kind of cake or treat that you bring into work for your birthday. And here is where you kind of start to see some funny differences always in how people go about this. Some people bring like a really fancy vlaai or slagroomtaart from like a fancy bakery. They're more like the traditional birthday treats. And then there are those who really like to bake themselves, so they will often bring like homemade goods. Then there are those who really don't enjoy much of this at all, and they just go to the supermarket and get some packets of cookies or something really simple like that. And then there are those who are maybe a little bit more health conscious, and they might bring something like fruit skewers or sugar-free baked goods, things like that. Now there is an important thing to mention, and that is that Dutch people tend to be very considerate when it comes to people's birthdays, and they really try not to forget. So in the office there will usually be someone with a little calendar keeping track of whose birthdays are coming up, and there will be like a signed card with all the colleagues having signed it. They will arrange maybe for a little gift, or they will decorate the person's desk or their workspace, and they will sing them a song. And another funny thing to mention is that many people have something very strange up on their toilet walls, and that is a birthday calendar. So we will write anyone and everyone's birthday in that calendar, so we make sure that we don't forget when we hang it up in a toilet for some reason. And then we will always send a little message to congratulate that person, and not just the person themselves, but also the people that they are close with. So their close family and friends, we will send them a message like congratulations with your brother's birthday, for example. Now let's talk about Dutch wedding culture. So of course people do get married here, but the way in which we go about it tends to lean a bit more again towards the simple and straightforward side, which fits very well with our culture. So if you want to get a formal partnership here, then you can choose to either get married or get a registered partnership. And legally speaking, these two options are very similar. There only are a few small differences between the two, and I will tell you more about which option that we chose for personally. So I found a stat that said that the accrued marriage rate in the Netherlands is 3.5 per 1,000 people, and this is the ratio of the number of marriages during the year to the average population in that year. So kind of confusing, but with 3.5 we are below the EU average of 3.9, and in the US it is 5.1. So fewer people decide to get married here. According to some research I did, the average cost for a Dutch wedding is 14,800 euros, which is around $15,600. Whereas in the US, the average is around $30,000, which is almost twice as expensive. And of course, that's not the same for all Americans. There will be people who have a much smaller wedding, and there will be people who have a much bigger wedding, much more expensive. But just to compare, only 3% of Dutch weddings cost 30,000 euros or more. Overall, I think the whole thing tends to just be a little bit more low-key here. So from what I see in American media, the engagement is already a really big thing with the big romantic gesture and the fireworks and the expensive engagement ring, and the weddings tend to also be bigger, whereas here in the Netherlands, I think the weddings tend to be on the smaller side, like 50 people or less. That was at least the case for the weddings that I've been to in my life. We just think that spending a large amount of money on an engagement ring and on the wedding is zonde, a waste, and we like to make it nice, but still within reason. My boyfriend and I went for a registered partnership. This was almost 4 years ago, and that was just because we wanted to have the legal things taken care of, just in case anything happens. But it wasn't really for romantic reasons in our case. We had already been together for 18 years at that point, and we would have been very happy just staying that way, but for legal reasons, we decided to get everything taken care of and get the registered partnership. And in that case, the option for a registered partnership is just really great because the whole thing took like 15 minutes and we spent around 200 euros on our wedding total, and that includes the flowers that my boyfriend got me. And then poof, you're legally spouses. It's really nice. And if you want to learn more, I have a full in-depth video over on my Patreon about why we chose not to have a traditional wedding and how we went about everything. So I think overall here it is typically accepted if you want to do the more traditional wedding and spend that $15,000, that's fine. But if you want to keep it much smaller, just a few close friends and family, like that's how my sister got married, that's fine too. Or just choose not to get married at all, which is basically accepted as well. So for reference, in January this year, we had 3.25 million couples that are married and living together, and this number includes people with a registered partnership, versus 1.12 million unmarried couples living together, of whom 470,000 couples had children. Basically, I think most people here tend to view marriage as an option, just a personal choice, something fun and nice if you want it, but it's not a necessity. And that is the same with having children in most cases. And of course, I'm not saying that the Dutch way of doing weddings and marriages is better in any way. The way that someone views marriage and weddings is just really different culturally and personally, so definitely do what is right for you. But for me, I really liked having the option of getting married in a super quick and easy, practical and cheap way. Alright, sorry for the possible change in angle and lighting. My battery died, so I had to change some things around. All right, so now let's talk about something that I think some of you watching are very likely going to find this quite strange. And that is that when someone is visiting our home, then we will just tell them when they need to leave. So this is about Dutch hospitality. Now, I'm not saying that I prefer this way of doing things myself, but as someone who is Dutch and who has lived here all my life, this is what I'm used to, and this is what makes the most sense to me, for sure. The thing is, I don't think that Dutch people are necessarily not good hosts or not hospitable, but again, we like things to be clear, we like things to be practical, we like to plan in advance, and we like there to be very clear and direct communication about all of it. So coming over unannounced really isn't being done here that much. We like to know in advance if someone is coming over. So I know in many other cultures, if someone comes over unannounced, you just try to invite them in and be a good host and give them something to eat and something to drink and let them stay as long as they want, even if it's not like super convenient for you. Here, if someone comes over and it's not convenient for us, or we don't have time, or we're just not in the mood, then we will just clearly tell them like, nope, sorry, not a good time, maybe another time. And this also means that we don't have to have food in the house always, just in case someone comes over, which I think is quite nice. It makes things simpler. And if someone is visiting us, then we will just, in most cases, clearly tell them when they need to leave. And this is especially true around dinner time. So again, we can be good hosts, but only if you have arranged for there to be food beforehand. So if you arrange to come over for dinner, then we will give you a nice dinner. But if you are hanging out at someone's place and dinner time is coming around, then the Dutch person will say, okay, we gaan nu eten, which means, okay, we will be eating now, which means that you need to leave. So I personally really like that aspect of hospitality that so many other cultures have. It feels very warm and nice and personal and inviting to me. At the same time, I also like how we do it here because it is so simple and practical and straightforward. There's no subtext, we don't have to have food in case someone comes over. And if we do have people over and we're getting tired or, you know, we kind of want them to leave, we don't have to like sit around yawning or giving hints or anything. We can just tell them, okay, I'm sorry, I had fun, but you need to leave now because I want to go to bed. And I know that Dutch people tend to have a reputation for being stingy or like not generous. And I think, you know, on some level there may be some truth to that, but when it comes to hosting people, I think we can be good hosts, we just need to know in advance. So if you arrange to come over for lunch or for dinner, then the host will very likely make an effort to cook something nice for you and let you stay over as long as you want and stuff like that. But we like things to be clear and we are planners. So last minute dinner changes really don't feel right for us. And lastly, the Dutch can be quite thrifty. We love to save money and we like to be responsible when it comes to money for the most part. And I think that also relates in a way to things like minimalism and simple living. Just basing this on my own experiences, I think that being a minimalist here in the Netherlands tends to be a little bit easier than being a minimalist in, let's say, the US, for example. And that is because we tend not to place that much emphasis or importance on expensive material possessions. Now, when I compare how much stuff I buy or how many clothing items I have, for example, to my friends and family, I'm still the exception. I usually buy a lot fewer things and own a lot fewer things than they are. However, I have never gotten any like remarks or questions when I say that I'm a minimalist. People tend to really understand and think it's pretty great, even if they themselves tend to buy a bit more things. So Dutch people tend to be quite organized and structured about things, and that is also why we plan our calendar months in advance, but we are also that way when it comes to money. We like to plan, we like to save, we like to make smart decisions, and especially when it comes to things that we don't enjoy spending money on, like things like health insurance or our phone plan, or even small things like laundry detergent, we will try to get a good deal and just not spend any more money than we have to. The lighting is really changing every like 5 seconds, and I'm trying to keep up with the stuff, but I'm almost blind from the sun, so I can't really see what I'm doing. I hope it looks okay. The Dutch tend to have a bit of a balance between, on the one hand, being levensgenieters, which means people who enjoy things about life, good food, which here oftentimes means not so much high quality food rather than a lot of food, but also enjoying the sun when it's there, doing fun things with family and friends, going on outings, going to the park, taking it easy on our days off. But at the same time, there are our Calvinist roots. So even if we are mostly not religious now, and we tend to be quite liberal and progressive when it comes to many things, you can also definitely see our Calvinist roots living simply and modestly in how we do things as well. A small example of this is if a Dutch person lends you money, even if it's a small amount, they will very likely pay you back very fast. And that is not because we think that you need that money or that you will get in trouble if we don't pay you back right away, but it is because of the principle and because we find it very important to be organized and structured. And I can definitely understand how this might come across as being stingy to people from other countries when a Dutch person sends them a tikkie, which means like a request to pay a certain amount of money to you for like 1 or 2 drinks, where they're like, it's like maybe 5-6 euros, and then they'll send you a tikkie. And people from other cultures think like, why do you want that money back? That seems a little stingy, just treat the other person. But we're not necessarily about being stingy, we just want that, like, we want it taken care of. And it's also kind of not done here to make very large purchases and then brag about it, like having a really fancy car, expensive home or something. If you do buy that stuff, you kind of keep it on the down low. Not always, of course, but that's typically how people do things here. We don't really like to buy things to impress others. We're not impressed by that status. And also, we don't typically ask people what they do for a living as like the first thing when we meet someone new. We don't really need to impress others with spending a lot of money. And that's why I think that the recent underconsumption core trend would fit in very well with Dutch culture, because we are already used to making things last as long as possible, squeezing out every last drop of a skincare product before we throw it out, borrowing something if we don't have to buy it, or going online looking for a good deal secondhand before we buy something new. Like this is called a flessenlicker or a bottle scraper, and that is something that we use to scrape out every last bit of yogurt, for example, from a carton. And I would love to know from you, after hearing these 5 things, are there things that maybe you would like to start applying in your own life a little bit more, or do you prefer how things are being done where you live? I would love to know, so please share that in the comments. And also, I recommend checking out Wild and using their Black Friday discount, 33% off everything. It's always really fun for me to see your comments whenever I partner with them on a video, saying that you've tried them as well and that you really like their scents and stuff. So it's always fun for me to see. Link and all the info in the description box. Thank you so much for watching and sticking around all the way to the end of the video. I really appreciate that, and I hope you had a nice time. And as always, questions, comments, conversations down below. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I will see you all again really soon next week. Bye bye. This video might also give you an idea about what Dutch weather is like, because every 5 minutes it changed from really sunny to lots of rain, really dark. I had to keep adjusting the lighting and everything else. So if you ever come here, bring layers.